you would like to share in terms of the transformative process or the core competencies, anything that is really striking for you in the conversation today? Who would like to start? Madi?
Yes, for me, once again, I've seen the power of metaphors and how can they simply completely change the angle you're relating to the story, to your thinking and your ideas you're pretty sure about. And it was a strong invitation of entering in the metaphor and creating the image. And I enjoyed very much the way the coach was, challenging in a very playful way the client to catch the metaphor and to use it and to play a little bit with it. So yes, that's my contribution up front. So
I love that, challenging playfully. And I think
yes.
it was really demonstrated that way. It was challenging, however, in a playful way, in a gentle and playful way.
Yeah.
And yeah, the power of metaphors in really creating that reflective thinking for the client, where the client really becomes resourceful. Great, thank you so much for your contribution, Madi.
Noah,
Hi,
can I?
Yes,
Hi. What a beautiful demonstration we saw by Dr. Ben here. And what I really appreciated was the coach was able to identify what domain the client was in. So the client was in a very logical thinking kind of frame of mind. And what we notice is a lot of clients come to us, they come in that kind of mindset and their minds are really closed. So when they're in this state, they're really unable to express themselves. And you could see by the client in this conversation, you know, all the answers were pretty fast. It came quickly. It was like, this is what I need to do. These are the questions. And you could see that the coach massively, slowly introduced using metaphors. So firstly, by these umbrella of questions. So the picture of an umbrella. Then he used, you know, there's two things happening simultaneously and you're standing now in the middle. So we're starting to capture images. And then the coach brought in the metaphor, you know, and challenged the client. What is the picture that you see? And you could see that the client was challenged a lot in that process. And it allowed the coach to come in with his own metaphor. And then from there, the client's mind opened up again and you could see it became more reflective. The client was able to slow down in pace and was able to actually draw from more inside as opposed to what was on at the top of her mind. She was able to see what was starting to become unconscious to her. And that's when this heavy came in. And I thought that was the pivotal moment in the conversation. So it's such a great demonstration how the coach masterfully brought in the use of imagery and, you know, this symbolic language to come in and really open up the client's mind.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, the word masterfully, as you said, and masterfully is really learning about how the client is learning or how the client is thinking and using that in coaching them. So I think that is powerfully demonstrated. Thank you, Evan. Yeah, Elena.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Thank you, Ben, for another fantastic demonstration of changing the way we look at coaching. What stood out for me among the many, many things that happened today was that when a client starts with a lot of questions, a coach usually works to get the client to get answers to those questions. And this was not about the answers to the questions, but to look at the questions itself. So the question behind the question, the big question that is covering the top question, and the end piece, which is can the way you're looking at the questions shift? I think that was a completely unique way of working, so unconventional, and we all have learned only that Then the client has questions. Your job is to give him answers or get him to look at answers. So that stood out for me very well. And I hope I get an opportunity someday to use that.
Beautiful, Elena. So yeah, it's not about solutioning for the client, right? It's about enabling the client to learn something new from the way they're experiencing their topic, the way they're questioning. What can they learn from that? Thank you. Yes, Elena, please.
Yeah. Yeah, other Alina. Yes, Noor. So yeah, and continuing to build on that, moving the client from the situational thing to the who of the client, and you know, the fact that the coach is not only someone that is asking some questions, but here in this conversation we see the contribution of the coach through all the reflecting back moments that were able to move the client for being in the situation and looking for a solution to looking to herself and you know it was starting with that, a big umbrella of thoughts in your mind, and then moving toward the lot of questions that are coming to your mind, and then the hand that is moving towards something, and again the question that is behind the question. So what is in the heart of the client? All of them, and further on with a metaphor that was beautiful. And again, a demonstration of how powerful is the metaphor, even though the client is maybe not used to do that and to see things in that creative way. And the perseverance of the coach to support the client enter into that different world that actually supported the client to make the shift. And yeah, and another thing is the power of language. You know, getting the client's language and using it and reflecting back so that the client become aware. So heightening the awareness of the client relating to what is she saying to herself so that she can change it. Yeah. Okay. So it was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, using powerful questions to make strong inquiries for the client, and it's inquiring about the what, the topic, and the who of the client, bringing it to the client's experience with that topic. And it was interesting to see even in the metaphor where the client was looking at others and how she can contribute. And so Ben reflects it back to her in terms of hello? Can you still see me? Yeah, sorry, I thought I broke here. Okay, yeah, so bringing it back to the client and how she's experiencing and supporting her to see things for herself rather than the outside. Joan, please.
Yes, thank you, Noel. I will just build on to what you've just said. I think what powerfully stood out for me in this conversation as well is the active listening. There was a lot of that cumulative listening that was connecting the dots from start. You know, all the time the coach kept on going back to where the conversation started when things were shifting. That connection weaving through the conversation kind of stood out for me. And the fact that the coach was able to all through hold that space, because in a couple of spaces, the client would ask, what did you just say? What do you mean by that? And all that. And then the coach could ably go back to what he had stated. And I think for me, that's played out nicely, because usually if your client is getting lost with what it is that you say, sometimes the temptation is for you to paraphrase, and that might lose the effect of what you are looking for. So that is something that you know, I saw playing out nicely in this conversation. And again, of course, it speaks to how masterful our coach is. So it was good to observe that throughout the conversation, because probably 3 or 4 times the client wanted to listen to the question again, and then the coach was able to reflect it back the same way he had brought it out. And even when it came to that picture, where on a couple of times the client wanted to get away from herself and look at the situation, the coach said, no, we are putting the torch on you. So for me, that kind of was an interesting thing to see, that, you know, as a coach, when you are master of the process, you know what it is that you're trying to create with your client. So you should not be distracted by the loss that is seemingly happening in the way it is landing for your clients. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yes.
So yeah, active listening and creating the space for the client. It's actually the integration of a lot of competencies at once.
Yes.
Beautifully demonstrated. Yes, Abiola.
Yes, so just to pop up on what Joanna said in terms of the process, I think the way the ACC process was demonstrated today was uniquely done. For me, I looked at the clarity stage where the coach actually used the metaphor to understand, to let the client reflect on the reality, and then also to picture where the client wants to be. I mean, I was just looking at the parallel in terms of if this were, I mean, if we were looking at it from a different perspective, one would begin to look at Kaylin, but that was artfully done in the sense that that image, that metaphor was being gradated. It was sort of in steps for the client to see how the new horizon was opening up. It was, I just realized that coaching can be very deep if you are very artful at it, and the principles are always the same. The process of the awareness, clarity, choice is the same, but the way you apply it in terms of the types of clients you have, their thinking domain, their reflective domain, their feeling domain, how do you ensure that you actually expand their mind and also let them begin to see where the gap is and get that aha moment? It was magical for me. I think this is a very good case study for me, and I will listen to it again to actually see how to marry the ACC process with the metaphor and that was used. It's very interesting. Thank you.
Indeed, Abiola. I mean, again, like the ACC process, to see how it was beautifully demonstrated. And as you're saying, masterfully demonstrated. The ACC and the core competencies of the ICF integrated and both masterfully demonstrated to see this transformative shift that it creates to the client. Thank you. Andrea.
Yeah, Noor. So yeah, like everyone has shared, I think it was an amazing conversation. And so what stood out for me was how the coach partnered with the client to support the client to really see. And I felt the way the coach allowed the client to see it in parts, because it felt like the client was in a loop of thoughts when the client brought the story in. And I feel that the coach very artfully put out the little pieces in terms of the bullets that the coach presented. And it was like all of that was on the table for the client to make sense and create the connections for the client. So I felt that that was very artful for me in that first bit of the conversation. And linking it to the core competencies, I feel the coach was in an amazing partnership with the client to really create that awareness, clarity part of it. And that clarity came as the client was looking at each of those pieces. And even like the whole thought pattern and language pattern of the client, how it shifted towards the end. I thought it was beautiful how the client said, I'm no longer finding people to give it, but I'm just releasing it. And I think that was amazing. So it was an amazing conversation again. So thank you so much to Ben for an amazing demonstration today.
Beautiful. Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, supporting the client to see the parts of their story. And then looking at one part, focusing at one part, and then bringing awareness on that one part. And then beautifully coming back into, okay, how we're going to integrate this learning to the metaphor, and how are we going to integrate that metaphor to your first desire that you came in the conversation. So wrapping that new learning up with the whole conversation.